There was a certain point towards the end where I started getting wise to the fact that that this is not sustainable. You know what else is funny? Never anywhere else have I seen, except for in New York, people putting straws into their soda cans. Do y'all do that? The first time I saw it was in New York. Never really seen it any other place except for that. Anyway, right, Bergdorf drama. Okay, so I'm sure it's becoming obvious to you at this point that my ex-boss was not big on boundaries, right? So one of the days I came in, she would usually just leave Post-its everywhere for me, and I would have to sort of like decipher what the hell she meant. So she left a wardrobe bag across her chair, and she had a little Post-it on it. It said, "My friend needs you to bring these back to Bergdorf for her." So I call her, and she's on her way to spin class, doesn't want to talk. And I'm like, okay, but yeah, can you clarify? Why am I bringing this back? Oh, well, just bring it to their sales department and tell them that she doesn't want it anymore and she'll be in touch with them as to what to do, blah, blah, blah. So super, super vague, even when I got clarification. So I bring these clothes over to Bergdorf, which wasn't far from her house. And the guy who was there, I guess good on him, he didn't want to take it. He was like, "You don't have a receipt. You're being very vague with why I'm taking this back." And I was very insistent on him taking it back because I knew I was going to be gone till the following week. You know, I work Tuesdays and Thursdays. This was Thursday. I can't come back to deal with all of this. Please just take it. So he took it, and Bergdorf, for being whatever, super fancy pants, well-paid people, I'm assuming, if they make commission, they freaking took her clothes, her friend's clothes in the garment bag, they put it back on the floor. They took it from that guy's office and they re-racked it like it was returned merchandise, which was not the point at all. I think her point was to exchange it, not to like return it for no money whatsoever. So I get a call the following week that her friend is very confused as to what happened. Her friend calls me and yells at me and says, "I called Bergdorf today. They said they don't know where my dresses have gone. This was a very simple request. I don't know how you could it up." And that same panic attack feeling starts to happen. And I go back to Bergdorf, and remember, I'm sitting, they had, at least at the time, these cutouts with windows on the edge of the building. And I remember sitting in it and wishing I could jump off, which I know is awful to say, but my body was in such a state of fight or flight that I just was fantasizing about somehow escaping the situation. The panic attack was so bad. I was having to tell myself stuff like, look, your body isn't actually in danger. No one is coming to get you. You're not being chased by an axe murderer. It makes me so sad to look back at these events because current me would never tolerate that stuff. And it makes me sad for me, my younger self, that I put up with so much stuff. Verbal abuse, so much gaslighting, and, you know, frankly, abuse of power. All these people that were working for her were desperate to keep their jobs. Oh, and never even mention the housekeepers. The housekeepers, the nannies, the driver, the cook, everyone would take her verbal abuse and they would just take it. They would shut up. They would bite their tongues. Literally, I would see their, jaws clenching as she's berating them. Long story short, it ended up getting resolved. They found the thing they put on the floor. They apologized to me profusely because honestly, it was Bergdorf's goof. The person that her friend told me to go to was not there that day, so that was on me. I should have just brought the garments home and back to Nancy's house and said, I can't complete this task today, so-and-so wasn't there. But I think I was just so determined to be useful and do good work. And in the process, I made a mistake, got myself into a situation that was very, very scary for me. Even though looking back, I'm like, all these people, all this, I know for her friend that those clothes were a drop in the bucket, like a tissue for her in terms of how much money they were. Another time, I remember Nancy just having a full meltdown. She had asked me to make a manicure appointment for her and make it with Rosie and tell her that it needs to be really quick. She needs to do really quick work, blah, blah, blah. So she had had manicures at her home before and spray tan appointments at a private masseuse, but she also would go out for manicures and she didn't specify. The salon was like, okay, you know, we've booked you for like 12 or whatever. So 12:15 rolls around and Nancy's like, where's Rosie? Call them and tell them, like, she's not here yet. And I'm like, oh, I booked the appointment for the salon though. She freaking lost it. I remember she was at the top of the stairs. They had this grand staircase that kind of wound down with this polished wood banister. Really, really beautiful. And in the center of that, hanging from like super tall ceilings, like this massive chandelier. And she's storming down her grand staircase in her freaking towel, calling me an idiot, saying expletive, expletive, idiot, how could you do this, blah, blah, blah. It was towards the end of my work with her. And that was definitely when I was getting so fed up that I was starting to see the writing on the wall that I couldn't make this my forever job and that it was running its course. It took a toll on my health. I had conditions develop during those 4 years that I was with her that I'd never had before. Stress-induced conditions that were really scary because, like I said, when I started with her, I was in my mid-20s and I only stayed with her for a few years, until my late 20s. And to be that young, already developing stress-induced physical conditions was really, really scary. So there was a certain point towards the end where I started getting wise to the fact that that this is not sustainable. Okay. So at that point, whatever, she's storming down. And I said something to her like, it was an honest mistake, okay? What do you want me to do to fix it? I just cut her off in the middle of her tirade. And she was so, that was the second time that I shocked her. And I feel like she respected me a little bit after that, because she really was like a toddler who would throw tantrums. And if you let her do it and do it and do it without putting any sort of like parameters around it, she's gonna go wild. This woman needed boundaries, seriously. Nobody was willing to put it on her. Even, I remember she had a therapist at some point that she would only talk to on the phone. Even though she had all that availability in her calendar to go and see her, she kind of wanted this therapist to be on standby, which I don't know how this lady had the time for that. Well, I do know how. She was charging her about $750 an hour. Terrible therapist. She would have her on speakerphone in the next room while she was dressing, and I'm in the guest room on the computer. And I would hear some of the shit her therapist would say to her, and I'm like, this woman is robbing you blind. She's in no way giving you therapeutic guidance. She's just enabling you, but whatever, that's really what Nancy wanted. I'll tell you 2 more stories and then hopefully that'll be the end. So the manicure meltdown, asking for a raise. Oh, okay. So back to the whole not the sharpest tool in the shed thing. At the end, when I was no longer working for her, which is a story that I'll get to, she and her husband got a divorce. And basically over the course of the 4 years they were together, like I said, she was cheating on him and like pretty open about it, at least with me. Spending a lot of time apart from him, had her own guest bedroom where she was primarily sleeping, and he was primarily sleeping in their master bedroom. Right, so I brought that up, her different business ventures. I feel like she thought she could use her husband's capital and somehow turn that into a super lucrative business for her, which isn't a crazy idea. That would be perfect for a savvy entrepreneur, to have all this capital that you can use and you somehow parlay that into a very lucrative business. You know those little phone things that you put on a phone? They're a card holder that you put on the phone. She got like a few thousand of these and printed stuff all over them that like really meant a lot to her in terms of like her personal causes and pride and stuff like that. Pride about where she came from. I'll just say, because I'm not trying to dox her, how much can you make off of, I'm sure someone can make a lot of money off of something like that. But she, even though she bought in bulk, she didn't really have a distribution plan for it. It wasn't like some drop shipping that she had set up. It was like, I think she was like selling them to her very wealthy friends. Honestly, how much are they gonna give you for a plastic card holder? Even wealthy people, like, they're not stupid. So whatever, I kind of felt bad for her during those things because it was obvious to me that she was trying really hard and that she wanted financial independence because the marriage was just going downhill. He spoke to her the same way that she spoke to everyone else, and she also spoke to him that way, so it was very volatile. The few times that I observed them together, it was super toxic. And then towards the end, when there were divorce negotiations, she had signed a prenup. So it was pretty cut and dry what was to be hers and what was not hers in the end, and she was not happy with that, even though it was very generous. I remember she would call him and just start wailing. She wouldn't even be crying. She would make up like a crying, how could you do this? I would see her on the couch, you know, like really texting, and then she's dialing. And then she's like, let's say his name is Samuel. She'd be like, Samuel, how could you do this to me? I raised your kids. I did this for you for so long. I can't believe it. Wailing like that for a long, long time, which was comical, you know, because it was like manufactured emotion. And I knew that she was crying about a situation where any one of us would have been so happy to get what we were getting. And I don't know, man, like no shade on people who can hire help, because if I could afford a full-time nanny, I definitely would have a full-time nanny. Not to be hands-off with raising my child, but just many people as you can have, I think, to help. I would love to have something like that. But the fact of the matter is that she just didn't see her children a whole lot. So I thought it was kind of rich, no pun intended, that she always tried to chalk up him needing to give her more money because of everything that she did to raise their kids. Her final business venture was actually a really smart one. She paired up with a designer. She basically did like trunk shows out of her house and invited her friends and their friends. And it was super smart because it was a designer from an area that all these people wanted to support. There was this exclusivity because it was by invite only. The pieces were really beautiful, actually. They were handmade and one of a kind. They didn't make a big line of them. So very chic, couture, exclusive stuff. So by the time she got to this business venture, I was actually giving her props and being like, Nancy, you know, I'm really proud of you. I've seen over the years how you've evolved, and, you know, in a heartfelt way. Because like I said, towards the end, I didn't feel like we were friends, but we were something like that. That's what it felt like to me. She would even ask me about my own life, and she donated some money to a web series that we did towards the end, I was in a play and she had me buy tickets for her to see it. And I was like, really, you don't have to see it? She was like, no, I want to see it. But she would end up never coming because I got fired before then, but we'll get to that. So it was the end of the year, right before the summer started, end of the school year. And she coordinated this big event out in the Hamptons. Her friend who lived out there had an estate, like a mansion. And her idea, Nancy's idea, was for us to do kind of like a runway show to show off the new line of clothes that this designer that she worked with, let's call the designer Amy. So Amy had just brought in her whole new line, and she would have that stuff for sale as well as older pieces and stuff. So I coordinated this whole thing. Rented a massive Sprinter bus for me and like 6 models and her driver to all go out to the Hamptons. I made the whole itinerary for the day, whatever. There was this one model who was a nightmare from the beginning. She came late to her interview. She had this whole sob story. At the end of her interview, she reiterated what her sob story was and like connected that to some traumatic part of her history where she happened to mention that she was raised by a single mother, and when they were coming to this country, her mother had all of their savings in cash, and the person at customs at immigration took all this money from them. I'm saying it like all that stuff is awful, and if that has ever happened to you or your family, like I'm not doubting in any way that people aren't taken advantage of and are at a great disadvantage immigrating to this country, like no disrespect whatsoever, but this girl, I spotted her in so many bold-faced lies in the short amount of time that I interacted with her that I am now seriously questioning the validity of that backstory. So she even negotiated a higher rate than the other models based on this sob story, and she negotiated that she would get picked up. All the other models, the plan was for them to meet at Nancy's house at 6 a.m. Nancy was already in the Hamptons, but me and Nancy's driver would meet with all of these models and all head out together to the Hamptons. So the agreement was that we make an extra stop, which the driver was pissed about, I was pissed about, the other models who found out were also pissed. Any one of them would have been happy for a pickup, right? We get to this model's house and she's not answering her phone. She's not waiting for us outside like she said she would be. I even called her ahead of time as we were en route, and she said she would be getting ready. We end up waiting for her an hour outside of her house. And at this point, it's a Friday heading out to the Hamptons when it's just about to be the beginning of the season. Anyone who's familiar with it, you know the traffic is a nightmare, like nightmare, like LA or worse level type traffic. That's why the super wealthy, they'll take helicopters and short flights just to get from New York City to the Hamptons. She finally comes out after I tell a friend of hers in the back that we're just gonna leave because our hands are tied and we're gonna run late. She's leaving us no choice. So she finally comes out. She's not ready at all. Whatever, we get out there. And then she's in my ear about how she told me that she's a vegan and where is her vegan food? First of all, she never mentioned that to me. Second of all, I had all these girls on an email ahead of time being like, hey, this is the food that we're gonna be providing. Please let me know if that's a problem, blah, blah, blah. I was communicating with them well in advance because I knew there was a lot of pressure being put on this day and everything had to go just so. And Nancy put a lot of pressure on me, and to give her credit though, Nancy was a big planner. I really liked because she was so infamous for her meltdowns that I wanted to make sure that we got all of this stuff taken care of well in advance. Long story short, sorry, I feel like that's the millionth time I've said this in this story. This girl was atrocious. She was so rude and nasty and entitled, and I confronted Nancy about it. And I essentially told her I was trying to get like some kind of overtime pay or something. I had to spend the night before at her apartment in Manhattan. And then it was the whole day that I was out in the Hamptons, and I was coming back late at night back to her apartment and then needing to commute back to my apartment. And I was puzzled that she wasn't freely offering me some extra money, because like I said before, she was always really generous, and she was that way with everyone. Like I said, she bought everyone's loyalty, including her building staff, who I know were privy to conversations that they shouldn't have heard. I know that they had witnessed her smoking, smelled it and stuff. So they turned a blind eye for a lot of stuff for her. But this was getting towards the time where her divorce was impending, and I think she was kind of realizing that the chickens were coming home to roost and that she was no longer gonna have the lifestyle that she had before. Don't get me wrong, she got millions in the settlement, but she was used to unlimited. So that's a little bit of a difference. Right, so I told her this was a nightmare. I tried to do the best I can do. This model is verbally abusing me. This was all past tense. I was telling her about it after. And she was like, all right, you know, don't worry, you're gonna get the whole summer off. You don't have to come in whatsoever, blah, blah, blah. And at the time I was pissed because I really wanted and probably needed extra money. But I just shut my mouth and I was like, okay, whatever, at least I'm not gonna have, because during the summer there was always this tug of war where she was kind of like letting me go free, but then randomly I would get an angry phone call where she was kind of accusing me of not doing enough work, even though she was the one who was saying I didn't have to come in every week. I mean, obviously this lady was not very stable in any way. So I get that summer off. And it was amazing. That was the last summer I worked for her. I was really enjoying myself and really physically taking care of myself. I had gotten into meditation. I was running. I was trying to get my body back into balance because I had gotten into such a cycle of stress response. I would be all fight or flight around Nancy, and then I would come home and try to let off some steam. And in talking to my boyfriend at the time about it, I feel like I would just get myself all worked up all over again. And then Nancy had this bad habit of randomly giving me angry calls, or randomly there's some emergency that needs to be dealt with right now. Even though I was a part-time assistant, and now that I look back, I'm God, that was so inappropriate. I came back in the fall and I was in really good shape and tanned and just looking like a snack. I remember seeing her face and she looked disappointed that I was looking so good. And that was gross to me because I'd never seen that side of her before. I knew it had to be all about her, but I naively thought she would be happy for people doing well and being happy. And I was in a play at the time, super happy about that, just feeling like fulfilled. So remember how I said she was very technologically insecure or whatever, and a lot of my job was like Googling stuff for her and dealing with her iPhone. So she, for the millionth time, wanted a new iPhone. I feel like it wasn't even like she always had to have the latest and the greatest. For her, it would just be like, she felt like it wasn't working right, so she would get another one. And like I mentioned previously, she would always leave all the stuff around her desk for me to do, returns to make, or, you know, mainly stuff having to do with like shopping, making returns, or sending stuff to the real, like with all these Post-its around, and I'm like doing forensic stuff to figure out what the hell any of it means. So she's got an iPhone out, and she had left me a message saying that she needed to return that iPhone. She did the iPhone replacement thing where they send you a new one, but they don't give you a refund or something until you return your old one. This was one of those days where she was gone the whole time and I was just working independently, which I was very grateful for, especially at this point. My patients were wearing thinner and thinner and thinner with this woman. Yeah, and I think it's because I was getting healthier and healthier and starting to see, even though I went back to that recruiting agency looking for another job, and they basically told me that there was no way that I was gonna get a job that was that well paid or part-time work. I kind of told them I begged to differ. They were curious why I would leave because they were like, you're making really good money and you're working part-time. Why would you leave? And I was like, well, you remember when she tried to replace me? She's a volatile person and it's a very hostile work environment. And one recruiter looked me in the eyes and basically told me the reason I was making as much money as I was making is because this woman was as abusive as she was. Whew. Which, like, I'll get off my soapbox really fast, but anyone out there, if you identify with that at all and you feel like you need to stay in an abusive relationship, be it romantic or professional, because you can't get any better than that, run for the hills, sister or brother. What a gross way to think of stuff, and what a lack mentality. Okay, I sent in the phone. I was done for the day. I called her a couple of times, Nancy, she didn't answer. So I leave, and on my way home, I'm going through the subway, which most of the subway don't get service because you're underground, you're totally cut off. And I see that she's calling me as I'm going over the bridge back to Brooklyn. And I answer, and she's like, where's my phone? And I was like, the phone you told me to return, it's at FedEx. It's getting shipped. And yeah, so turns out she left the wrong phone out for me. And she blamed that on me, of course. So that was the end of my job. She was always so paranoid about losing all of her contacts. And I never knew, I always knew she had two phones, right? Her iPhone and her burner phone. Turns out she had three phones. She had two iPhones and her little burner phone. So when I saw the iPhone out, I assumed, and also because she was like, return my iPhone, and that was the iPhone laying on her desk, along with all the other stuff that I was supposed to take care of. Ooh, so I made peace at that point. Yeah, this is definitely gonna be the straw that breaks the camel's back. Even though I had spent 4 years terrified, for the most part, of losing this job and feeling like I had to keep it. It's what they call the golden handcuffs. I was making so much money, and to a certain extent, I think I agreed with that recruiter. Where am I gonna make this much money? And also it's part-time, and also they respect me and they're nice to me. Yeah, I doubt it. But I had become so miserable with her, and spending that summer away from her and detoxing from all of that nastiness, I started to feel like I didn't care if I lost the job. I often wondered after that, I was like, did I do that subconsciously on purpose with her phone? Then I thought about it. I'm like, no, definitely, because I didn't even know that other phone existed. I didn't even know there was a possibility that I was dealing with the wrong phone. I had no idea. And I did try to verify it with her. She was very dismissive and not really wanting to talk to me that day, which, what else is new? Something funny, I guess. She had tickets to, I don't know how you say his name, Ed Sheeran. I'm sorry, I don't know how to say his name. She had tickets to his concert, and I have to just say this plainly. She was so stupid about these tickets. Sorry, I'm skipping forward. So she calls me when I get out of the subway and I'm walking to my apartment, and she's like, how could you do this to me? You know, that same voice she was like using with her husband. I can't believe it. I lost all my contacts. Like, how could you? You stupid. And then she goes, you're fired. Like, no emotion whatsoever. Just, you're fired. And I hang up on her because I knew her and I knew that she was just going to keep going and going and going and going. I block her number, and I told you about her atrocious children who had no boundaries, just like her. I don't know. It could have been her. I think it was her kids. I got emails from her later that night with all these angry emojis and cryptic, you stupid emoji, which I'm pretty sure it was her kids. If it was her, oh my God, I feel even more sorry for her. Crazy. That was the end of the relationship. And so like I was saying, her husband's assistant kept calling me after that to check up on these concert tickets. And after the third time, I was like, this is the last time I'm answering. She's getting the tickets at a later date. This is the phone number you can call to get any more answers that you need. After that, we're done. And her husband's assistant was really sweet. He went through assistants every 6 months. Also, he was awful to work with. Husband's assistant like understood my plight, and she was like, listen, I'm so sorry this happened to you, but also you deserve so much better than this. Yeah, and she was really sweet about it. And I always did like her. She was the one that was with him the longest that I remember. I think she was with him for 2 years. After that, I was able to file for unemployment and I got it. And it was kind of tough for the next year or so finding work, but eventually I got back into my groove and whatever, I figured it out. But whew, yeah, that was a crazy experience. I feel like I was in a state of fight or flight for about 4 years. What a wild world. High society world of Manhattan, the multi-millionaire old money kind of circles. So I hope y'all enjoyed. I'm sorry it went so long. If you want to know anything else, just ask, and I'll see y'all later.